This movie will be hitting theaters in September 20th?
September 20th.
Yeah, so come out and see it again.
Everybody has to go again.
Yeah, I hope you guys liked it enough to purchase another ticket September 20th.
Tell all your friends.
Yeah, please.
Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
It's a huge,
Thank you.
huge treat. We're thrilled to open the festival with the New York premiere of your film. So I'll ask a few questions, and I'm sure the audience has a lot to say. But jumping right in, you mentioned that you guys met 15 years ago in college.
Just about.
Don't
want to age ourselves.
Oh yeah, sorry.
We were
some time ago. And this is your third feature that you've made as a collaborative endeavor.
Couple, you can say.
Yeah.
You can say it.
So I was just wondering if you could start off by talking a little bit about your working relationship and your how a movie like this comes together as sort of a joint venture.
Sure. Yeah. So we did meet. We were randomly assigned roommates freshman year of college. So that was the NYU bursar is probably responsible for this movie more than anybody else. But yeah, I mean, we were best friends for a few years before we started to really work together, and I think that's what makes it all possible. Because if you can't argue with your collaborator like they're a sibling of yours, and have the ability to move past a creative difference or take a creative difference you have and actually make something better because of it, then it just isn't gonna work. And it's funny because a lot of people ask us like, oh, should I get a writing partner or a directing partner? And we're kind of like, no, not necessarily, because it has to be the perfect person that you just have the same kind of mind and everything. And I think just over the years, that's kind of what we've become. So.
That's how the process works. He's got it. I trust that answer. I don't need to add anything.
This is, in some ways, this is a story about two couples across a generational divide, and but there are some similarities between these couples, but obviously they are at odds, and the mechanics of the story really follow from that sort of tension. And I wonder if you could talk about how you built the story around that idea.
Sure. Yeah. That is definitely true. When we started conceiving the story, we knew that Mickey and Jules were characters we wanted to follow. We were just really interested in these lovers on the run, and sort of preoccupied with the idea of could we establish a love that between two characters that was so compelling and magnetic from the jump that it would do away with or make their transgressions that we show on screen okay. So that was kind of the fun challenge we were working with. And then, we knew we wanted to start with a bang. We knew we wanted to have them break into a house and find something they shouldn't find. And then the question was, well, who are the antagonists going to be? Who are the foes that we're going to pit them against? And we went through a bunch of options, and ultimately the most interesting to us was kind of a bizarro world, warped, toxic foil of themselves in, 30 years. Because that really gave us the most kind of, stuff to chew on between the two of them. And you look at, there's a lot of movies that are lovers on the run stories, and so we just thought it was kind of interesting to take, let's say the couple from True Romance and pit them against, Natural Born Killers, and just sort of like have fun with that, because all those movies have a different moral universe that they exist in, where sometimes you're with the characters the entire time, sometimes by the end, like in Natural Born Killers, you're like, I don't know if this is okay anymore. There's a lot of murdering going on. So we just thought that was a really interesting quartet to play with. And once we'd drawn those characters, they sort of just wrote themselves. We dropped them into a location and, let them go.
You do a beautiful job of walking the line between comedy and true suspense and tension and sort of unsettling dread almost. And I think there are a lot of things that contribute to that we can talk about. Certainly the look of the film and the performances. I'm interested in asking, actually, Maika, since we have you here, one thing that audiences might know Maika from was her leading role in It Follows, which yeah, fantastic film.
And the guest.
Great performance. And that is a very straightforward horror film. That is very straight-faced. I mean,
Yes.
It has humor,
agree.
but it's sort of a subterranean humor. And so I was interested in sort of how you approached this kind of a role that was, again, very straight-faced, but also you have to work in a very organic way with the sense of humor of the story.
Yeah, I mean, what drew me to the script was the characters and the relationship between Jules and Mickey, and I fell in love with them immediately. And yeah, I mean, you read a lot of scripts as an actor, and this was something special. And I think what makes the film so enjoyable is, like you were saying, you know, you're laughing, but also you're like, fuck, this is a bad situation that we're in. And so I think it makes it really fun, and I think even just reading the script, I could feel the fine line of kind of leaning both ways, which really intrigued me.
Yeah, and you know, I think that sort of mix of horror or thriller and comedy was sort of the best thing that the script had going for it, but was also a challenge because, you know, it's great from an actor's perspective. We knew that this script might stick out amongst your stack of scripts that you're reading, but at the same time, once you decide to do it and you know, look into who's making it, it's like these guys nobody's ever heard of, and the first couple of films we made are not this tone at all. And so we were, you know, kind of asking them to creatively just trust us that it's not like we always knew we wanted to make this film and films like this, and that this was something we wanted to do, but you know, for a few different reasons, our first couple of films were not that. And so they kind of had to, it took a long time to find the right actors that understood what we were going for here and wanted to be a part of it, because it's a risky thing for an actor like this, because if, you know, we always say, like, if you're doing like a straight drama or something like that, there's the ceiling and the floor are a little tighter, where if that movie comes out poorly, you as an actor are not necessarily going to, you know, it's not going to hurt you so bad. But if you do a movie like this, like if we fucked this up, the actors would have looked absurd, you know? And so it's a risky thing for them, and we thank them all for taking that risk.
You just mentioned the look of the film for a moment before, and it just reminded me, we have a lot of crew members in the audience. Our cinematographer, Matt Mitchell, production designer, Annie Simeone, Danny Johnson, who plays Officer Wells, our location sound mixer, Brennan. Why doesn't everybody just stand up if you're involved in the film? Our gaffer, Andrew Hubbard. Oh, Ketterer, I didn't know you were here.
Ketterer's here.
Hey, buddy. Jordan Drake, our key PA. Oh, yeah, this
I know.
Murderers Row over here. EP Chad Harvold. So these are the people that actually made the movie look good and sound good and feel good.
This is like that SNL sketch when they're at they're at the short film festival, and they afterwards they're just like, hey, everybody who worked on the film, come on up, and it's the whole audience except one person.
We figured this would be a friendly screening. It's our hometown screening, so.
Can you talk a little bit about the look of the film and how, because that is one of the most vivid and I think sort of striking things about that you take with you after seeing this movie. Everything from the look of the house to the credit sequence and this sort of punchy.
That's the product of a whole bunch of these craftspeople. Their amazing work. To sort of call out a few of the key elements, our cinematographer Matt Mitchell, who shot all of our films, hopefully will shoot all of our films. He's always been, you know, an incredible creative partner to us, and we start really early and start talking in really broad shapes about what we want for the look of a film, and then he actually knows what he's doing, so he goes and figures out how to make that happen. And in the case of Villains, we knew it was this kind of crazy, you know, adventure, a lot of like drugged out sequences and this and that. So our lens choice was really important, and Matt went and hunted down a set of really weird, wonky, anamorphic lenses that give the film like a lot of the, when a focus rack happens, you really notice it breathes quite a bit, and you'll see like fringing a bit on the edges, and we sort of really loved that. It just, in a lot of ways, we wanted to design this film to be this sort of fairy tale and exists, north of reality. But south of farce, and a lot of that is that lens choice and just the way that we collaborated with Matt on the coverage design, and then also hard to miss the production design of the film that Annie Simeone is responsible for, and her incredible team, Lisa Green, our set decorator, and they gutted this house basically. They brought all of the regular furniture out and brought a bunch of wallpaper and really weird, unique pieces in just to give it that feeling of a time capsule. Something that George and Gloria, who are these sociopaths that are just kind of wearing like this human skin but don't have much in the way of core identities except what they've pulled from old like Clark Gable movies and stuff from like the 50s. So it was. And on all films, the DP and the production designer are on the good ones at least, are really close collaborators, and I think Annie and Matt really pulled quite a bit of a Herculean effort off by making this film look the way it does.
Yeah, and then Matt Reynolds is the animator who did that sequence at the end, and he was just, we had seen his work. He did the bumpers at South by one year, and we were there with the film, and they just always kind of stuck with us, and Chad Harbold, one of our great friends and executive producers, hooked us up with him because they had a previous relationship, and we just kind of, it was funny because that sequence used to be at the beginning of the film in an earlier version of the cut, and we kept kind of getting these notes that were like, the beginning of the film is lacking a little bit of energy or whatever, and we're like, really, is it? And then we sort of got this note from a really great filmmaker friend of ours who said, yeah, I think the sequence kicks too much ass. Like, you need to, like, if you didn't have that start, you wouldn't have that expectation of that energy. And then so when we put it on the end of the movie, it just made so much more sense because, the movie itself has a somewhat somber ending. And so that title sequence, that credit sequence allows you to still leave the theater with like a little pep in your step, and it has almost the opposite effect where when it's at the end, it makes you think the movie you just watched was even more energetic than it was. So it's a funny thing how all that works.
And that specifically is illustrative of like this movie was such an incredible learning experience for Bobby and I, where you hear the adage of you make the movie 3 times, once when you write it, once when you shoot it, and once when you edit it, but you don't often see that really proven. But for us, that final step in the edit, we made so many discoveries and so many changes that made the film really click into place that weren't there in the script, and not necessarily there when we shot. I think one of probably our favorite scene in the movie isn't in the movie. It was like an extended monologue that Maika has in the basement with Sweetie Pie, where she talks more about her backstory, and there was just sort of a pacing issue in the second act, and we were like, couldn't figure it out, and we were like, fuck, well, I guess we fucked up. The movie doesn't really play like it should, And then finally we were like, well, even though this sick, like 5-minute, one take dolly push where she's crying, like if we love it, but if we get rid of it.
It was the hardest thing ever, because it was the best thing we'd ever done. And
it really is.
But it was just like, it just didn't, in that moment, it was almost too good. It was like much like the title sequence. It was too much emotion for that moment in the movie, and it kind of stuck out as this. It got a little too real for a second. And
sorry, Maika.
And once, yeah, I know. Sorry, you're too good of an actor.
No, thank you.
But
once we removed it, we were like, oh shit, it's a movie now.
Yeah,
we did it.
Yeah.
So
it's so funny how close, like that pH balance, that little line that you dance, like you're one scene away from a movie feeling totally, paced incorrectly.
And it's a definite another adage. It's like kill your darlings. Like that's a really easy thing when you have a bunch of scenes that you don't like. You're like, oh, I'm killing my darlings, getting rid of these scenes that don't work. But that was so hard to get rid of. But it helped the movie in a holistic way.
You just got to put them in the special features.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
There we go.
I mean, I think it
buy
really,
the DVD.
it really shows because it's a movie that has incredible chemistry. Just all the pieces work together in a way that feels very precise.
Thank you.
I just want to throw out while we still have some time, in case the audience has any questions, I'm sure they do, so I'll open it up.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that was something that we were kind of dealing with the who lives, who dies question until fairly late in the writing process. And with Gloria, I think what it came down to for us was that the evil in that relationship came from George, who was more this sadistic person, whereas Gloria, we felt a little bit more was somebody who suffered from mental illness and was being taken advantage of, or kind of found this person that she latched onto who just happened to be this really evil person, and so she just sort of through osmosis absorbed some of his sadistic tendencies, and so we just felt like every time we killed her in the writing process, it just felt too much. It felt like it was too much, It felt like she didn't quite deserve that, and it kept kind of coming off as weird. And then when we, this way where she is, she's alive, but it's not going to be good from this point on. Felt a little bit more appropriate for her.
Well, yeah, and a decision like this is a little bit more like economic. It's packed with more juice because you get to learn a little bit about Jules as well through her mercy that she shows. Because I think Jules understands that Gloria and George's love is a very toxic and obsessive and codependent one, and Gloria without George is perhaps a fate worse than death for her. So we felt like that was kind of a nice note for Jules to go out on as well, who we think is on the moral spectrum of this the most, virtuous and pure. And then Mickey, of course, is a controversial death. A lot of people get mad at us for doing that, but we felt that the moment that he made an effort to abandon Sweetie Pie in the basement, he was already doomed. So,
We're very vengeful gods with high standards.
Yeah. But Bill is still alive, so it's just the character that died,
That's true.
actually.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Well, all you have to do is take out student loans, and then you'll get I have about $120,000 worth of them, so it's pretty fun, even if you don't have money. But no, I mean, I think that, honestly, if I could, not if I could, we met in college, so it's a different, I think the value of like going to college for film is more about the people that you meet there than it is the actual learning of the craft. I think you learn a lot more and a lot quicker if you just get on a set and you just start PAing, you just work your way up. Like, you don't have to, at no point has anyone ever, at no point has anyone ever been like, can I see your BFA, please? Like, that's just not how it works in this industry, So, yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, and then I think it's just get on set and it all will kind of work itself out, and then I think the sort of tougher part is if your aspirations are to eventually direct or something, it's making that first movie, and that I think was the hardest thing for us. It was hard to get this movie going, but only because we were trying to make it at a certain level. Our first film we made for $50,000, and that was like, that was just pulling from family, friends, and things like this, just cobbling it together, and dentists that live down the street, whatever you could find. And I think the important thing, though, that a lot of younger filmmakers sort of miss or don't think about as much as, like, you should really think about making a movie that is going to be inexpensive to shoot. And I feel like, it sounds obvious, but a lot of people will think like, oh, my movie doesn't have like dinosaurs or car chases in it, so it'll be cheap. But it's like, yeah, but is it in like 17 locations? Like, you're fucked, So that's why, like, our first movie, it all takes place in this one sort of big mansion, and that's our first lesson that we learned kind of was how much more time you have if you're shooting in one location, because you're not loading in and loading out every day. And so our first film we shot in like 11 overnights, but it felt more like having like 15 or 16 days because we were able to just get in and shoot and then leave at the end and then come back, and all the lights, you're not doing company moves all day long. So I think that's sort of the biggest thing, is to, like, I feel like there is a stigma where you kind of like, there's like this icky feeling in the creative process when you're thinking about budget, writing your screenplay. But I think it's just a reality. You know what I mean? It's like, do you want to have you want to be able to make the movie or not? You know, and I think you have to have a little bit of that producerial side of your brain when you're making your first thing, because it has to be cheap, because nobody lets you direct a movie until you direct a movie. It's weird.
Just speaking about the inspiration for the characters of George and Gloria and how we sort of handled that situation. So yeah, we always like to think about George and Gloria as if they were sort of like Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek from Badlands if they didn't get caught at the end of the movie, and they just kind of kept on cruising and jumped around the country for a bit and landed on the East Coast 30 years after their adventures in the movie. So that was kind of a character duo that we were looking at. And then as far as the real life, stuff in the news that inspired it, we were writing villains initially right after that horrific story came out. It was like in
Ohio.
I want to say Ohio. Sorry, Chad. I want to say Ohio.
It wasn't Chad. It
wasn't Chad.
State
no,
that he's
but
in.
it was that guy that had like 3 women in his basement, and one of them finally escaped after like 12 years, because we were kind of trying to figure out what's the boogeyman in the house that they find. Like we knew some parameters we wanted to fill, and so we did sort of rip that from the headlines a bit. The idea of someone holding, someone captive in that way. So I think those elements kind of created the cocktail that led to George and Gloria. And then the actors themselves brought so much to the roles that, like, it's hard for us to even remember what was on the page. I'm sure it was very flat and boring, and then Kyra and Jeff made it what it is.
What were you were talking about the antagonist you settled on. You were talking about you had some other iterations of the antagonists. What were the antagonists, the prior iterations of the antagonists?
Oh, man, I mean, that's no fair. To be honest, I do not remember.
Yeah,
we wrote this movie in 2014. We wrote this movie a long time ago, and a lot has come of it since then. I don't want to make it sound like there were, it's not like, was it lizards or like a shark? Like, they were versions of, humans who lived there, and where it was just a matter of what's their backstory. Is it like, do they have, at that point we didn't even necessarily know that it was going to be a little girl that they found or something, So there's a lot of, it could have been somebody running some sort of operation or some kind of thing where this was not like the first person they were holding there, and like, are Mickey and Jules going to become part of their, whatever they're doing here, and it actually. It was nice when we finally decided on George and Gloria, because it became so much more about the characters instead of the, whatever cool sci-fi-y weird story we could be, telling them do it. If it was going to be that it was like, some aliens, or they're like, harvesting people's organs, like, it's just a whole nother thing that you kind of, get into, and it can make you lose focus a little bit. And it was nice that we were able to, we wanted to be able to have all the scary stuff come from just like these people, like in their personalities,
A question for Maika. There are some moments in the movie that are pretty gory, but for me, maybe the hardest scene is
I know where
the
we're
tongue
going
stud.
with this.
How was that like shooting that with Bill Skarsgård? Because you're both pretty closely together, so that must have been a little bit awkward to do so.
Yes, there was a fake tongue involved. It was pretty weird looking.
Brian Spears and Pete Gerner, right, to the special effects makeup team.
Yeah.
Amazing. That was the tongue ring was always a challenge. I think we've all agreed we're never going to do a movie
Never
ever
again.
again that
Never.
has
Made a
a tongue ring in
mistake.
it. Never.
You can't like fake it. That's the
No.
thing. Like, we were like, oh, it's like an ear piercing. Like, we'll find a magnetic one, or so your tongue is
No,
too
'cause then
thick.
you
It doesn't
swallow
work
it,
that way.
and
And
then
then you
that'd be
can't
bad.
talk when it does it, And then
I think when we were writing, we also thought that we'd just be able to find an actress that either had a tongue ring or was
would get
willing
it.
to pierce their tongue for our movie. And then when this became a reality, we were like, wait, we're
What is
fucking
wrong with
idiots. No one's gonna do that. The chance of infection is like 40%. Like, there's no way that we're gonna do that. The insurance company will drop the movie.
Yeah, we're asking like professional actors to risk losing their tongue.
Yeah, you don't need that, right?
Not a good idea.
Yeah. No,
But
it
yeah,
was
there were a bunch of
special.
devices we used. There was a little suction cup thing that
Well,
she
what
had to.
I loved the most was that, you guys you did it with me. We
Had
each
to.
had our fake tongue rings and we all tested it out together.
Well,
Like if you suck the air out and then like they did look, and like we're all just like running around.
Yeah.
we did it all. We did it all together. That's important.
We
That's the
did.
thing Bobby and I do with our actors. We don't make them do anything that we haven't done. So we were all snorting lines of powdered milk
It's
during
true.
rehearsals.
It's true. They did it too.
Which-
See, it's fine.
Yeah, we're all pacing around. We're like, that's milk, right?
Good
milk.
Great.
But yeah, with the end of the tongue stud saga is that you can't even fucking tell if she has a stud in her mouth or not. Like you can't see the top of her tongue. So
Yeah, I mean,
it
we
didn't matter.
just like we kind of realized at a certain point, like, well, she can just have an actual tongue stud in her mouth for every scene we're supposed to be chewing on it, and other than that, you're not seeing the top of a person's tongue most of the time, or you're at
the
least
tongue
not
is inside
looking
the
at it.
mouth. It
Yeah.
turns out
It is. We
So
found that out
didn't
after.
even-
Yeah.
Can't see it.
What kind of draws you in general then to the horror genre?
Is that for all of us?
All,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I think you should start.
Oh, okay.
I think you should
Okay, I
start.
will. I mean, I grew up watching horror movies. I was obsessed with horror movies, and I think there's something that's so fun to like be really scared, and it's not a feeling. Well, I hope it's not a feeling you have every day, because that'd be bad. But there's something I think very special about the horror genre, and I guess reading this script. You know, there were scary elements, but also really funny elements, but also really grounded elements that all put together, I think, make a very special and, yeah, I don't know, it was something very unique that, you know, yes, there were horror elements, but also something very refreshing about it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I think that we, you know, don't get me wrong, we love horror movies, but I feel like it would be unfair to some directors who are truly like obsessed with horror movies, and that is exactly what I think it's been a little bit more of not a coincidence that we've made horror movies, but it just happens to be that these movies that we've made have been, you know, and like the Villains is not, you know, it's not Hereditary. It's not gonna scare the shit out of you the whole time. It's not you know, so I don't wanna say that we didn't like get into movies like to make horror movies. You know, it was something that we developed a love for. I think it's something that like when I was little, I didn't want to watch horror movies. You know what I mean? Like, and it wasn't until I started to like, you know, really, you know, get into college and hang out with a bunch of people in film school and started you know, you had to be like, yeah, I'm fine watching a horror movie, absolutely, throw it on, I'm fine. And then you kind of, once you get past that fear, you know, that's when we started to fall in love with them a little bit more. But I don't want to say that we like place horror as a genre above anything else. It just happens to be what we've done so far, I think.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a really exhausting conversation of like, is something a horror? Is it not a horror? Like, there's so much of that with like Jordan Peele's movies, and like I got Twitter. I'm seeing enough of that. But you know, I don't think we would necessarily like market this as a horror, because it does like create expectation for a viewer that wants to, you know, really.
Or at least as just a horror.
As just a horror, right? There are certainly dips into horror, and you know, but our first movie, Body, like I wouldn't call that a horror. I'd call that a thriller. You know, even our second movie, which is a vampire movie, I'd still call it probably like an action movie that has horror elements. So, I don't know.
They're all just movies, man.
Yes.
So what was the first scene that you guys shot? Like, I guess excluding exterior trees, you know, like that you.
In
I guess you
time?
can each answer
Like
that. Yeah, like I guess like
chronologically?
actually like
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I know you don't necessarily film it in sequence, right? So I guess like
Yeah.
what was that first?
Yeah, you wish you could. It's always the goal is to shoot chronologically, but it's often impossible. This is a great question for David Ketterer, actually, our first AD, who's responsible for putting the schedule together.
It really is the schedule for this movie was a real Swiss watch.
Yeah, well, you know, because the one of the, you know, we've said there's a lot of practical benefits to shooting a single location, but one of the issues with it is that it's a real dance of where you're going to be shooting versus where all of your stuff is being stored, all the equipment and all the, like, you know, dozens of other people, and you have to be prepping for days ahead. So the first thing that we shot,
The basement.
yeah, we
Basement.
shot the basement for the
That's-
first 5 days. Ketterer, correct me if I'm wrong. 6. Okay, 6 days. Because we needed to. This is another fucked thing about this location, but the driveway was the grade was too high to keep a truck in the driveway, so we had to bring the truck in, unload all the equipment into the house, and then have the truck go somewhere else. So while we were shooting the basement, all the gear and stuff was upstairs, and then when we finished the basement after the first week, we went to the first floor and shot that floor out, and then all the equipment while we were shooting that was put into the basement, and then our set decks and G&E guys that were pre-lighting were like up on the second floor preparing for the coming days. So it was
You could really you can just imagine like a sort of cross section of the house and all of us in like fast motion just going around like the Benny Hill theme song. Like that's what it was like.
But while we're shooting, no one can work. So it's like everyone's like moving shit and putting C-stands away, and like the art team is like stapling shit to the walls and stuff. And then we call action and everyone just has to stop. So it's like really frustrating to work in a single location, but I do think the benefits outweigh the liabilities of it.
We're gonna run to the next
Round of applause for our mic runner.
Yes.
Wow. That was a run.
So it sounds like you guys went through a lot of iterations about who was going to survive the whole thing by the end of it. I'm curious if, when you started writing this, if your intention was to write a female protagonist into the film, or if that kind of evolved over time. Was that something on your minds kind of from the beginning of writing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess we didn't like. I think it was more like the protagonist of the movie we were writing is a female than it is us being like we weren't going out and being like we need to like make a movie that stars a woman and like take advantage of some social moment, or it's just what the story was. I didn't think we didn't really try to do that. It's just kind of the way it was. Like our first movie was the same sort of thing. Like there was
killed.
There was.
That ever thought?
We would never.
Never.
No,
Thank
you were
you.
always too good.
Yeah. But one thing we did want to play with Jules was sort of audience expectation based on how she behaves and how they behave as a couple when you first meet them. And we were kind of trying to do a slight rope-a-dope where we wanted to introduce her as like a little bit sort of like ditzy or like without agency. Like she was just going to follow Mickey's lead, and he was like the sort of super capable, dude who could pick locks and like all that stuff. And then at that moment when he wants to leave Sweetie Pie and she's like, fuck you, I do not give a fuck, we're not leaving here, and you kind of realize like, oh, okay, she's actually calling the shots. I just didn't realize they're so in love that they have such a trusting relationship that you guys just sort of masked that from us, but like they each get to have agency at different times in the film, and obviously she kind of takes over in the third act and has the sort of plan and executes that to actually get her out of there. So that was something we did want to play with as it pertains specifically to Jules, like what your expectation would be, from the first scene onward.
I loved the car wash scene, and I wanted to, I thought that was a great metaphor for their love, and I'd like to just, maybe you could discuss some of the creative aspects behind that, and which came first, the chicken or the egg, the first scene or the last scene?
Right. Oh, that's a good question. I think that was definitely the first one was where we, and it was one of those moments where like then when we thought of the second one, we were like, oh, what if we do it again at the end? And it was just something that like, it was something we had both, we both had, experiences with, where that was just
not
like,
with each other.
Like not with each other.
It's not long
like
enough.
We each like when we kind of were thinking of what we just wanted something that they could do that was specific and that would kind of make you instantly fall in love with their love, but I think the better part is how we actually shot that, because it was like way more elaborate than what it looks like up there. We were on a stage that day, and we had like a platform that was like 6 feet off the ground, and so she's laying on top of it with like a 4-foot wig like this, and the camera at the bottom, and it's just like it's so much more elaborate than it probably needed to be, but like it's so funny because it's such an emotional thing when you're inside of that tunnel with them, and yet like from our perspective we were like out behind the monitor, and there's Maika on this weird like table thing, and we're just like cry, So it was like it was a strange thing, but yeah.
Well, I think that is all the time we have, unfortunately. But I hope that everyone will come and join us for a glass of wine or a beer at the reception, generously hosted by Gunpowder and Sky. We're very grateful. And can we please thank these...
Thank you, guys.
Thank
for
you,
coming.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. And thank you, Maddie.
Thank you all for coming.
Thanks. Go see the movie September 20th.